Japan is known for being a very conservative and conforming country, except for when it comes to the party scene in Shibuya and Harajuku, but that's besides the point. But one thing that a lot of people don't know about is that Japan has a very colorful history of anti-establishment groups. And at one point, the entire country was terrorized by roving packs of high school girl gangs. No, I'm being dead serious. They were called sukeban gangs, and they were basically delinquent high school gangs consisting of all girls. And while they weren't the most dangerous criminals like the Yakuza, they were still involved in a lot of petty crimes like vandalism and even turf wars. They were so prolific actually that Japanese police sketches described their outfits as omens of downfall. But for all the fear and moral panic they caused, they were also a national sensation. Sukeban gangs were portrayed in so many movies and stories from Japan in the 70s and 80s. And they're an iconic character trope in anime now that you've definitely seen one before. So what gives, right? How did a group that came off as intimidating become a beloved trope in Japanese storytelling? How does one form a roving violent girl gang anyway? And what's with their fashion in those long pleated skirts? And the answer to all of that is a lot more complicated than you think. But before I tell you the story of the sukeban, let me tell you a story on how you can get authentic snacks and food from Japan through the sponsor of today's video, Tokyo Treat and Sakura-Co. Tokyo Treat and Sakura-Co are a monthly snack box service that sends authentic Japanese snacks and food right to your doorstep. If you're like me and you grew up wanting to try these snacks that you see in your favorite anime and manga, this is a really convenient way to do that. They come absolutely packed with all sorts of snacks from Japan, and like you can see here, I am trying to frame the shot while at the same time trying to make sure that none of the items spill from the box because yeah, these things are absolutely packed with food. And if you're even more like me and you have certain dietary restrictions, they come with these handy booklets that not only tell you about the cool people making the food, but also what goes into them. For example, I've always wanted to try authentic Japanese mochi or a mochi type snack, and I was really excited to see that there was one in the Tokyo Treat box, but unfortunately, according to the booklet, this mochi snack does contain some gelatin in it, so I wasn't able to try it. And since I can't consume gelatin or any pork-related product, these mochi snacks were off the table for me. But what was on the table were these Kit Kats though, which were absolutely okay for me to eat. Which is really cool because I know Japan can get a bit crazy with their Kit Kat flavors. Here in Malaysia, we got like chocolate and darker chocolate, and that's about it. So getting to try new flavors of Kit Kats that I always see YouTubers that live in Japan eat is really awesome, and I'm super grateful that it's included in this month's Tokyo Treat box. So yeah, if you have dietary restrictions, these little booklets are a literal lifesaver. And another cool thing is that each box is themed, and the current theme for this month's boxes is Valentine's Day. So all the snacks are meant to give you that sweet feeling like love is in the air. So if you want to treat yourself for the occasion or for your beloved, you can do so by using my link in the description or in the pinned comment below and use my code Muxedo to get $5 off your first order. Thanks again to Tokyo Treat and Sakura-Co for sponsoring this video. Now, back to the sukeban. So it's really important for me to mention, just like in my Bosozoku video, sukeban gangs aren't really much of a thing nowadays. They kind of died out by the mid to late 80s depending on where you read, and if you do see anyone dress up in sukeban fashion now, it's more so out of the novelty of it all rather than anything else. But that doesn't mean the story of how the original sukeban gangs came to be is any less interesting. Because yeah, not every day you get to hear about violent all-girl delinquent gangs. And it all started in 1960s Japan. This was a time when delinquency was at an all-time high. No, seriously. While it wasn't the biggest crisis Japan was facing at the time, the number of delinquent crime cases were on the rise, and did pose a genuine problem for the local community and police force. Delinquent groups like the male-dominated bancho gangs, which were groups of all male students who were children to working-class families, were directly challenging Japanese conformity, especially amongst the youth. Add on the fact that Japan was also in the middle of experiencing second-wave feminism in this time as well, meant that now you got a portion of said delinquent youths questioning their roles in society in general. And it's in this storm of questions that the sukeban gangs would get their start. But I have to mention two things. It's really important for me to say that sukeban gangs were not Japan's feminist vanguards. They weren't quoting feminist literature as they roamed the Tokyo streets. It's just that they coincidentally wanted the same things that Japan's second-wave feminist movements also wanted, which was more independence and agency for girls like themselves. And two, this wasn't the only reason why sukeban gangs were made. The primary reason why these all-girl delinquent groups popped up in the first place was on the simple fact that some girls just wanted to run things themselves. Most delinquent gangs in this time were male-dominated, with female members at most only being able to achieve the rank of girlfriend to said male members. And some girls just weren't satisfied with this. They wanted their own groups with their own symbols and their own hierarchy and their own way of running things. And when they did get the chance to run things themselves, they used the very school uniforms they wore as a way of expression. As Yokogawa Mag said in their article about Sukeban fashion, quote, "The core piece that became to define the Sukeban culture was the seifuku, or sailor-style uniform. But the Sukeban version wasn't the prim and proper attire mandated by the dress code of the Japanese education system. Their skirts were lengthened to defy the rising hemlines of the era's vision of proper femininity." You know, in my Bosozoku video, and I mentioned that they wore something called the tokofuku, which were these custom boiler suits that were embroidered with bright slogans and imagery, and how that piece of clothing became a unifying visual identity for that subculture. Essentially, it's the same thing here with the Sukeban, but replace custom embroidered boiler suits with your government-mandated school uniforms. The traditional sailor-style uniform was seen as a tool of the establishment, and in some circles, an objectifying tool. And when you have youth of working-class families clamoring for respect and identity, you get the desire for self-expression. So they wore long skirts and hiked up the top half of their uniform to expose their midriff. Their fashion went against the idea of what a proper school girl should look like. There was also a practical reason for wearing these long pleated skirts, which is to hide weapons. Some Sukeban groups were involved in petty neighborhood crimes like intimidation. So things like metal bars and chains and even cutters were really easy to hide underneath these long pleated skirts. There's also the fact that pleated skirts look intimidating. No, I'm being serious here. And this is not even a Japanese thing. Long pleated skirts like these add weight to a person's silhouette. It sways with you as you walk and can add a sense of bulkiness to how you move. So while one person wearing these long skirts may not look scary, a gang of them brandishing knives and metal bars walking towards you might make you think otherwise. But either way, the outfit would serve the Sukeban's purpose. They were still school kids at the end of the day. They weren't gonna wear anything crazy. It was about sending a message to the adults just as it was making a visual identity for themselves. And eventually, they would be noticed. Not just by the adults they tried to defy, but by Japan's very own entertainment industry. So you might be saying, okay, learning about their drip is cool and all, but what did they do though? At least gangs like the Bosozoku held rallies, fought the police, and blocked off highways. These girls look like they just do petty crime and farm aura. And yeah, that's basically it. Okay, for a better answer, let's go back to Sukeban fashion for a bit. You know those modern Japanese high school uniforms with the blazers and sweater vests that you see in basically every high school anime ever? Well, part of the reason why Japan switched to these kinds of uniforms IRL was because of the Sukeban gang. According to this paper by a researcher whose name I will not try to pronounce because I know I will butcher it, said, quote, "Sukeban, despite their bad behavior, reverently wore their school uniform both outside of school and post-graduation. To combat the Sukeban's brand of delinquent dress, high schools adopted the Western plaid skirt and blazers, ironically giving way to the new and major tribe of deviant teenage girls, Gyaru. And honestly, I can relate. Here in Malaysia, pretty much all of our schools have us wear a standardized uniform, and we have to wear them for 11 straight years. And God help you if you added any kind of personal flair to your own uniform, because the disciplinary teacher will bring down heaven's wrath on you. But my point is, the Sukeban were a nuisance enough to the authorities that there were genuine attempts at curbing their influence. While they weren't blocking off highways like the Bosozoku or doing the real big crimes like the Yakuza, they were disruptive enough in a way that mattered to them by being disruptively independent. They were still school students at the end of the day. They weren't gonna bust kneecaps or rob banks. And even if they did, it depended on how violent that individual group was. Sukeban gangs were not a monolith. Most groups were involved in petty cases of shoplifting or small street brawls. But the simple fact that they were young girls acting outside the rules that society placed on them earned them a lot of street cred and a lot of curiosity. Rather than fear, some parts of Japanese society were intrigued by the Sukeban gangs. A wave of small indie films about the Sukeban came out to the absolute attention of the Japanese audience. Films like Sukeban Gorilla and Lynch Law Classroom gave the common person a glimpse into the inner workings of Sukeban gangs. But I do have to mention that there is some nuance here, because the movies that I mentioned were under the genre of pink films or pinky films. And the best way I can describe pinky films were that they were basically Japanese exploitation films. They were basically Japanese B-movies made by indie studios trying to make as much money as possible by capitalizing on trends like the Sukeban, who were trending publicly at the time. And in order to make as much money as possible, they made these films as violent as possible and as raunchy as possible. And while I can't really show these raunchy scenes because, well, YouTube, my point is that there was a bit of a conflict of interest. These movies were some of the earliest stories in Japan to have a Sukeban main character, helping to propagate their image a bit. But they also did objectify them in order to get people to watch these movies, which ran against the intention of some Sukeban gangs, which was to avoid being objectified. In the end, though, these movies did make the Sukeban larger than life, further adding to their legend and how people saw them. It normalized the idea that women, in storytelling at least, could be portrayed to be ruthless just as much as kind. And this myth-making would get 10 times bigger when eventually anime and manga would make stories about the Sukeban. It was a catch-22 in a way. At the time, they were an attention-grabbing thing that made for new and unique stories. But if you did see them on the street, you were very much told to walk the other way. But eventually, the Sukeban gangs would fade in notoriety, both because of the Japanese government's increasing efforts to curb delinquent crime groups, as well as the simple fact that you can't be an outlaw forever. Just like the Bosuzoku, when a Sukeban reached a certain age, they had to graduate out of the gang. Japanese delinquent culture is a very age-coded thing, meaning that by age 20 or 21 like that, you had to leave and get that job, unk. But even though they faded from the limelight, they left a lasting legacy in Japanese pop culture. And the funny thing is, even before watching this video, you have definitely seen a Sukeban way before this. So just like the Bosuzoku and Gyaru, Sukeban is one of the most represented subculture tropes all across Japanese media. Doesn't matter if you watch anime, J-dramas, J-films, or just read manga, chances are you have definitely seen one before. And they are in places you probably didn't expect them to be. Like, yeah, you have the manga Sukeban Deka and its live-action films and series, which are considered cult classics in Japan. They're considered a really good place to get your feet wet if you want to explore the Sukeban genre. But then you get to the smaller titles that make you go, wait, that was a Sukeban? For example, in the series Sailor Moon, yes, that Sailor Moon with the bright colors, frills, and the never-ending use of the power of friendship actually had a Sukeban character. Emphasis on the word had. The character Makoto Kino was actually supposed to be a gangster-type character named Mamoru Chino, where Makoto in the anime and manga is this kind-hearted and gentle gardener with the hopes of opening up her own flower shop. Mamoru Chino was this rough and tumble, cigarette-smoking delinquent girl who ran with a separate gang. But this idea for the character was later changed down the line. And you can actually see the remnants of her gangster girl original draft by looking at her outfit in the manga. Long pleated skirt, hiked up top revealing her midriff. And yeah, they justify her looking like this by saying that she's too tall and none of the school clothes fit her properly. But I maintain, it's way too coincidental to not be a leftover remnant from her original draft. And in terms of more modern representation, there's a lot. So much so, I wouldn't be able to cover them all in this last segment. Because like I said, this is a very old character trope that has been going on for a while. The one I'd like to mention is the 2015 anime Kill la Kill. I have a personal soft spot for this anime because it aired while I was in high school, and I'm gonna be honest, it's hard to call this anime a reference to Sukeban subculture when there are so many things evoking that Sukeban spirit. It's more of a hyper-stylized love letter more than anything else. Some scenes in the anime are a direct one-to-one recreation of shots from series like the Sukeban Deka live action. The overarching plot of the main character rebelling against a tyrannical school system is basically what the IRL Sukeban tried to do themselves. And said main character, Ryuko Matoi, wears an outfit that's oddly similar to the one that they wear in the Sukeban Deka live action series. And if you still can't tell, this series had a lot of influence on how the Sukeban character trope would be portrayed today. And Ryuko's personality matches that of most Sukeban members. She's outspoken, itching for a fight, stubborn, and most importantly, violently independent. And that's the major theme for a lot of Sukeban characters. They come off as strong-willed and hot-headed, but ultimately they mean well. They're the rebels of the group. They're the freedom fighters, and more often than not, they end up as one of the closest companions to the main character. They're abrasive, sure, but that was the ultimate goal of the original Sukeban movement. To be loud and proud enough that society at large would have to notice you. And before you say anything, no, I'm not making a sob story for them. As petty as the crimes the Sukeban committed, they were still crimes. And while I can't confirm, normal everyday people were probably affected by them. But what I am saying, just like any other youth subculture not just from Japan, is that they spoke the only language that was available to them. Violence and delinquency wasn't the goal. It's just that they were the only way to push back that made sure the adults in power got the message. Every youth movement and subculture does this. The culture changes, the clothing becomes different, the slang more complicated, but the tension is all the same. Can it be a bit goofy? Absolutely. But that doesn't mean there's no merit in listening or finding out why these delinquent gangs or subcultures exist in the first place. Were some Sukeban gangs motivated by the simple idea of doing crime? Yeah, most probably. But equal to that, there were members who just wanted to push the limits and behave in their own way. The Sukeban weren't trying to be remembered in media or in future stories. They were just trying to exist on their own terms, in their own way, in their own day and age.